Welcome to our first ever official podcast. We've gone live before, but this is our first official podcast, and we're going to talk about personal growth because there are so many things that I wish I had known when I went down this path of personal growth. So, we're going to talk about personal growth in a way, and the things that we're going to talk about are probably things that you've never considered, and that's why this is so important to listen to this podcast, to watch this podcast if you're on YouTube. What we do in NLP a lot is to look at language. That's the linguistic and neuro linguistic programming. Words shape your reality, and consequently, your reality that you're experiencing from within shapes how you speak. So these things are linked together, and you cannot really pull them apart. But what we can do is we can examine our words, examine the terms that we use, and see if they're actually connecting with the deeper structure. That's what we call it, deep structure. What we're really talking about is sensory-based information. Is this actually real? And for most people, they're not living in as much of a reality as they think they are. They're more living in the concepts of their words. Personal growth is no different. I hear this term being thrown around so much in the field of personal development and self-help. I don't think a lot of people really know what it is that they're referring to. They never really stop to examine it. You also might have noticed that I have two other people here with me. I have my wife, Yulia, and my business partner, Nate, more specifically, Nate the Great. So they're going to be chiming in, offering their wisdom. Also, hopefully they'll challenge me a little bit, because I think challenging what I'm saying here makes the conversation more interesting. So hopefully they'll do some of that as well. So before we get into what we're actually going to start with is what personal growth is not, before we go into what personal growth is. But before we do that, just want to check in with my co-host. Anything to offer before we take the deep dive?
I'm excited for starting this podcast, and I think we should just dive right into it.
Yeah, and I'm excited to. I'm also looking forward to having these conversations. I think it's a great place for us to talk. It's gonna be fun.
Now, I like to talk, as my co-hosts both know. So you're going to have to maybe try to interrupt me here, because I might just go on tangents and I might just drown both of you out. So you might have to go like that. So I know for those of you who can't see us right now, I just opened my mouth as if I was going to say something. So if you guys want to say something, try doing that. And if I happen to see you, then I'll stop. But what you might just have to do is just blurt it out and interrupt me. All right.
So you accept interrupts?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a podcast, right? Okay. So what personal growth is not? Number one, it's not a goal, though most people treat it that way. Now, a lot of you might be saying, what do you mean it's not a goal? My goal is to grow personally. That's really not a goal, because it's really hard to measure, first of all. Secondly, a goal is something you either achieve it or you don't. You either get there or you don't. You either check the box or you don't. And if you treat your personal growth that way, that means at a certain point, you're going to stop when you think you have achieved personal growth. And personal growth is just not an achievement. It's a journey. It's an ongoing thing. Now, you can set goals within the context of your personal growth, and that's fine. That's, in fact, that you should be doing that. But the personal growth itself is lifelong. It's not, so what would the goal be? The last day of your life? You could say whether or not you achieve the goal. It's just a really bad way to look at it, because I think you will get to a point where you'll say, okay, I think I've achieved it. And then what are you going to do then? You're going to stop? No, you keep going. So personal growth itself is not a goal. But within personal growth, you can set goals.
Yeah. So how do you interchange how do the two work together as far as your experience is concerned?
I think of personal growth, like I mentioned before, it's a lifelong thing. It's a journey. If you're not growing, then what are you doing? This is the way that I like to say it is, and people seem to just run when when I say this, is if you're not growing, you're dying.
Sure.
We're all dying.
Sure.
We're getting closer to death every second, right? But if you're not doing anything, if you're not like living your life, if you're not growing, then you're just dying. I would rather grow while as I'm dying. And personal growth is its own reward. So I don't need to think of it as a goal. It's like, no, I don't want to stop. It's great when I achieve a goal. But this is the real problem with goal setting. I'm not going to go too far into it because I have talked about this a lot before, and maybe we'll talk about it in a future podcast. People don't see anything outside of their goals. They set a goal. They think, okay, when I achieve that, I'm going to experience, whatever fulfillment I believe that I'm going to experience. And because they're not experiencing it as they're achieving the goal, a lot of times they run out of motivation.
Mm.
And so the other way too is that you have those high achievers who do achieve a lot of goals, and then when they achieve it, they don't get much reward out of that, but they feel lost without a goal. So they just set another goal, withhold, gratification and any joy and fulfillment in their life as they go chase another goal, and it just becomes a treadmill. And then those people end up seeking me out for coaching a lot of times, and they're wondering how could they achieve so much, have so much, have so many wonderful things in their life at the same time they don't enjoy any of it because they're only thinking in this very goal oriented mindset. Whereas if you just say, okay, hey, I'm on this journey of personal growth and I'm curious about how far I can take that, how much can I grow, what is
Sure.
there in my potential, that's far more rewarding and more fulfilling, and you never run out of motivation. Sure, you'll burn out sometimes, that happens. Sure, you'll have disappointments, but it's such an ongoing thing that you get joy, you get fulfillment as you're growing. Sometimes growing is painful too, but we don't want to forget that part as well.
Do you use goals in any way as a signal or some part of your own personal development? Or
Sure. I mean, like, if you were, if you're working out
Mhm.
and you say, okay, I bench press 215 and I want to get up to 225, you kind of set that as a goal, as a place marker to say, okay, that's where I want to go. That's the direction I want to go. And if I hit that goal, then I know I'm moving in that direction of greater strength, greater muscle growth. And personal development is the same way. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe I want to up my income, and I have an idea in mind. But it's, if you do in the process of achieving a goal like that, you completely sell your soul, because the goal becomes so important that to achieve it, then you're not enjoying it. You're probably compromising your values, so you're lacking that fulfillment. You're losing motivation. But this is what happens when we fixate on goals so much. So let's take a bigger journey here, and let's think about your overall personal growth. And I think that's far more important.
But at the same time, I would say that even if someone focuses solely on goals, they still grow. Maybe it's not the best way for them to grow, but would you say that someone who focuses only on goals doesn't grow?
Well, I mean, there's many ways to grow. Are you growing in the way that you want to grow? And so that's why you set the direction by the growth, not by the goal. The goal should be in alignment and service to growing, to the overall vision, the overall plan, the overall journey. If you think about just going from one place to the next, if like we just took a trip to Ohio, and you're on the way, and you're setting goals along the way. We want to be here. Certain, we didn't drive, we flew. But if you were driving, you would say, okay, I want to, by in the next 2 hours, we want to reach this point, and then that's how your goals should drive you to that, drive you in the journey of the direction you want to go, not the other way around.
So then basically, like in a simple explanation, it would be you want personal growth, and then you have to go and chunk it down and say, in what direction do I want to grow? What do I want to achieve? And then you have certain goals. And by achieving those, and obviously you work more, it's not just about the goal, like you mentioned before, it's about values and all of the other things. But in general, look at personal growth as that's the final line, but you chunk it down.
I think that's a great way to put it, is to say that you take personal growth, which is massive. You think, okay, well, how do I want to grow? And there's all these questions, right?
Mhm.
Chunk it down. And the chunking down is your goals. The other thing too, though, to keep in mind is, again, it's that fixation on goals that people do so much that can go the wrong way. Is as you're moving toward a goal, you might realize, wait a minute, this is not giving me any fulfillment.
Sure.
This is not working for me. But if all you have is that goal and you don't have the greater context of your personal growth, then a lot of times we'll stick with a goal because we just hear, well, you're not supposed to quit, and so you keep going and going and going, but you're going in the wrong direction now. So what I tell people is never commit 100% to a goal. Commit 100% to your values, commit 100% to your journey, commit 100% to your personal growth. And when you set goals that are going to align with that commitment, you might find along the way that that goal is actually moving you in the wrong direction. So that's why you don't want to commit to a goal. Then you say, okay, yeah, I'm going to change directions here. I'm going to throw that goal out and I'm going to try a new goal. All right, I think we really fleshed that one out. Huh? Beat it to death, I think.
Goals is a major topic, and I feel like the first thing you hear when people talk about personal growth and achieving things is goals. What's your goal? What do you want to achieve? So yeah, I think it's a topic that's always in front of us.
Yeah, and that is what screwed me up for many years. I was so focused on goals, and then most of the time I wasn't achieving them, and then I would beat myself up about it, and then I just say, okay, I don't deserve it, or I'm not worthy, and that's just like pure nonsense. And so we don't want to do that. We want to have a bigger picture in mind. Now, the next one is, I think, really difficult for people because we always want to know that we're making progress, right? We always want some sign that we're growing personally. And what we often try to do is we try to measure that progress by how much we impress others and by our status. What status have we achieved? And oftentimes that is the focus in personal growth. We think about how much we're going to impress other people or what status we're going to have. Now, some of you out there might be saying right away, hey, that's not me. I'm not like that. The moment you say that, you become very susceptible to falling into that hole. And I know what's that?
What do you mean?
Well, the moment you say that, oh, I'm not doing this for status, or and you may be sincere when you're saying it, but as soon as you sort of do that, you create a blind spot that could lure you into that.
Interesting.
Because it feels good to impress people, right? When you see someone impressed with what you've done, even though you might not be trying to do it, but when you see it, you go, yeah, I did that, huh? And then you kind of want to, you want to do more of that, and then there's the whole status thing. So it's very seductive, but I should maybe say the point itself. Measuring progress by impressing others or by status is not personal growth. So that's the second one. But it's very tempting to get into that, especially when you've been told before by someone, and this can start like early in life when a teacher told you, hey, you're just not good enough, or you just don't have it in you. You just don't have the talent. And you're like, I'm going to show that person. Michael Jordan talks about how much that drove him to become such a great basketball player. And people go, oh, well, there you go. See, Michael Jordan, there you go. But what he has also talked about, and other people around him have talked about, is he had to switch gears after a while because that was making him miserable. When everything is centered on proving something to someone else, and that person becomes imaginary, because at a certain point, when Michael Jordan didn't make the basketball team and the coaches who told him he couldn't, that no longer was true. Those basketball coaches weren't still saying, Michael, you just won all those championships. You're still not good enough for the high school basketball team. That thing was just living in his head, and it was still driving him, to misery over that. You don't have to do that. The talent was in him, the drive was in him, and he could have, let that thing go and moved on and explored his talent and his potential on its own without it having to be about proving something to someone else. And so I think it's easy to get caught up in that. I'll show that person, or just, the general good feeling that we have when people are impressed with what we've done, or even in our minds or our fantasies about impressing people or achieving some sort of status. That can get you places. It's true, it can. I'm not saying it can't, but that's not real personal growth. I remember a friend of mine, a journalist friend of mine by the name of Chris Rose, back in New Orleans, whenever I was living there, and he knew I was going to move to LA. He said, don't move to LA. He said, stupid people become successful in LA. Smart people become successful in New York. He said, you're really smart. You should go to New York. So I moved to LA. But I think what he was pointing at, and no offense to anybody who lives I still have friends who live there. They're going to be like, hey, I heard what you said about that, about stupid people. I think what he was saying is that the people becoming famous, which is status, or impressing others, says nothing about who you really are. It says nothing about your personal growth. And I think that's the main thing to remember. So yes, you might impress other people, you might achieve a certain status. That doesn't mean you're growing on a personal level. So you don't want to judge your growth by those terms. And at the same time, I'm not saying that you shouldn't impress others, or you shouldn't have allow yourself to rise to some sort of status. If people are impressed with you, and if people have confidence in you to the point where they put you in a certain bracket of status, that's fine. Like, enjoy that. Have fun with it. Appreciate it. Just know that that's not a true measurement of your personal growth.
Sure, makes sense.
All right, moving along. Number 3, constantly talking about everything you plan to do with everybody is not personal growth. Now, I used to do this. I still know a lot of people who do this. There's so many times I've had people say how much they had thought about starting a YouTube channel, and they're saying it like it's they're still going to do it. And then I'd say, okay, well, when are you going to start? And and so what happens is the constant talking about it sort of makes them feel like or think that they're actually doing something about it. It actually gives them a false sense of working towards something, but you're not doing anything. You're just talking. It also reminds me of when I was living in LA. I was a part of different writers groups, and we would write something. We wanted to write something, and we wanted that validation right away. We wanted to know from other people, that what we were doing, for hours a day, alone or in a coffee shop, had some value here. And so we would rush it out to give it to everyone in the group, for them to critique it. And one of the things that I noticed is that, myself included, when I would do that, or when everyone else would do that, they would never work on that piece again. And the reason why is because
Interesting.
whatever they felt like they were trying to express got expressed, not well, in a very raw form, and then it got critiqued. And it's like trying to, if you're overly critical of a child who's trying to learn something, what do? They're just going to stop trying to learn it because they're not ready. Their personalities are not fully developed. They don't have the ability to sort of understand, criticism and how to, shield themselves or protect themselves from it. So when you're constantly talking about everything, you're sort of releasing the pressure within you that is driving you to go and do that thing.
Actually, I'm not sure if I agree 100%. I think it happened to me, and I'm sure there are also people that whenever you talk about something you want to do with someone, you may put an extra pressure on yourself, and it kind of works like a motivation. You want to do it because you don't want to disappoint. So, for example, it even happens with myself. If I decided I really want to finish this by the end of the day, and, I push myself to finish it, and then you'll have that accountability. If you tell someone I'm going to do this, maybe they even expect you to do it, or they don't even care, but it's that motivating factor for you to actually accomplish it.
Okay, so I'll qualify this further. I'm glad you're challenging me on that. It's not to say that you shouldn't tell anybody. What I'm saying is you don't tell everybody. So
that's complicated. It's hard to even go into
no.
everybody.
I'll clarify right now. So what if I tell, and I do this, I do this. I tell my kids every year, I say, where do you want to go? What trip would you like to go on? And then they'll tell me, like my son wanted to go to G-Fest, Godzilla Fest. And what did I tell him? I said, okay, we're going to do that. Now I'm on the hook because he's involved and I don't want to disappoint my son. So that's the kind of accountability you're talking about. But if I, bump into an old friend who I haven't seen in a long time and I go blah, 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 blah about all the things I plan to do, and then I see someone else I know and go, hey, this is what I'm planning to do, blah, 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 blah. And I spend, most of the day talking about the thing that I plan to do with a variety of people who don't really care. They're living their lives, they're doing their thing. Now I'm just letting all the steam out of it. There's no accountability there. They're not, if they see me again, yeah, I might go, when they go, hey, I thought you were going to do that thing. And I have to go, no, I got lazy or whatever. I didn't go and do it. Now, if you should talk about your plans with people, especially who are involved, who are affected by your plans. And then, yes, there's an element of accountability there. But if you're constantly blabbing about what you're going to do, and I've seen people do it, they just talk about what they plan to do. They never do it. So the same thing works with like just your basic talk therapy. Why does talk therapy work? Well, sometimes it can solve problems because there's a certain sense of reflection when you're talking about things with other people and you're kind of going second position with them and seeing how they kind of understand it. So sometimes you can solve problems, but more than anything, and this is what Sigmund Freud discovered, they called it the talking therapy, is that when you actually talk about things, you relieve the pressure and the tension
Hmm.
of whatever is going on inside of you. So it gives you some relief. The same thing happens when you talk about those things that you really want to do, but there's a tension building when you feel your potential calling. There's a tension building inside of you. That's
Yeah.
what's driving you to go and do that thing. But then if you go constantly releasing that tension by telling everybody about it, chances are you're never going to do it because you just uh, keep lowering your motivation to do it by depleting the pressure.
So I have a question for the two of you. So it sounds like there's two different environments that you're referencing: the accountability-driven environment and versus like a pressure releasing environment. Can you give me like characteristics of each one, so that way people that are listening to this or watching this can identify where they're if they're in the right place when they're talking about their goals and their aspirations.
Well, I would say like we all three work together. We're in business together, and
Mhm.
so when one of us says, "All right, I'm gonna go do this thing," like
Mhm.
starting this podcast,
Mhm.
then we're kind of putting ourselves on the hook. There's an expectation that we're going to do it, and I would say one of the things that makes this business work is we follow through with what we say we're going to do.
Mhm.
And man, each one of us, I know for a fact, hates it when we fail to meet that at least the deadline. Doesn't
Sure.
mean that we're not going to follow through and do it, but when we miss a deadline, like both of us, I mean, I just know what goes on between us. When we know we're not going to make a deadline, and then when we have a meeting and you haven't made a deadline or you're not going to make a deadline, Nate, I know you're just like, I mean,
Right.
it's a bummer, and
Yeah.
that creates another kind of tension, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's that tension that drives you to be like, okay, I didn't make the deadline, but I'm going to complete this thing. I'm going to follow through with it.
I think also the difference is based on the person you're talking to. If you're telling someone that you really care about, or someone that you aspire to, or maybe someone like in business, in work that you account to, you definitely have that accountability factor because you care. But like you
Mhm.
mentioned, Damon, if you just meet a friend that you haven't seen in a long time and you start talking about your plans, you don't have accountability there because there isn't that strong connection between you and that friend. So I think it's really important to recognize with what person you feel like you create accountability versus you just blurt out what you want to do.
Yeah, have good friends who are going to call you out when you keep talking and you're not doing.
Yeah.
And I have, I don't have many friends like that, but I have a few, and that's one of the things I like about them. They're gonna say, "Hey, you know what? I've heard you talk about this for the third time, and you haven't taken the first step on
Mhm.
doing this. Either do something or stop telling me about it." And I've told people that. I've said, same thing. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Having employees in my insurance business, how many times did my employees say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do this," and I was like, "Okay, you've told me that 3 times and you haven't done anything. Like,
Mhm.
stop talking about it. I don't want to hear about it." And oftentimes they have to hold that in now, and holding that in builds enough pressure inside of them that they have to go and do it. So you can even motivate people that way, calling them out. And nobody likes to be called out when they know they're not going to actually do something about it. So they will stop talking to you about it because it's just uncomfortable to be called out and told the truth. But I think it's great to surround yourself with people, even if it's just one person, and that's what they call them something accountability partners, right?
Mhm.
So
Sure.
I'm not against that. I'm not against you talking about what it is you want to do. You just don't want to talk about what it is you want to do with everybody. But people, in a sense, kind of convince themselves that that is their personal growth, that they're
Right.
actually doing something when they're not really doing anything. And I heard a person named James Marshall talk about this with a different subject, but it's like he says it's like eating fast food. Your body thinks you're nourishing yourself because you're putting food into your body, but the truth is there is no nutrients in that food. So
Right.
you're not really being nourished. And the same thing goes with when you're constantly talking about, your plans. You're deluding yourself into believing that you're actually growing personally. You're really not.
So an actionable for someone who's listening, if you have the desire to share with someone, just check in. Is this person helping me stay accountable to my own mission in this area? Or is it just, is this potentially letting off steam that I could use to create that vision? And it's also okay to ask someone, hey, will you be my accountability partner?
Absolutely.
And that's also very useful.
Yeah.
What's interesting here is that there are also people who work the opposite, as in they rather not tell anyone what they plan to do because they don't like the disappointment. So then they will rather keep for themselves any plans they have until something is actually moving.
Well, so I think the reason why people talk about a lot about what they want to do is because it sounds good and it gets them excited, but also there is that pressure that they want to release. So I think kind of what you were saying, Nate, like when you're thinking about doing that, stop and say to yourself, okay, am I wanting to say this because I feel this pressure inside of me building? And this is really good. If you're feeling pressure inside of you building about something that you want to do, you should know right there you're on the right path. Something good is happening. Something is telling you something that you need to be listening to. And if you're feeling that, then ask yourself, okay, is the best thing to do with this pressure building inside of me is to tell someone about it, or is the best thing to do to sit my butt down and start working on it? And most of the time when I feel that pressure building, I know the answer to it. The answer to it is sit down and start working on it. And so that's what I recommend for most people. All right. Let's talk about what personal growth is. I think we talked enough about what it isn't. People are like, okay, I know. It's not those things. Can you tell me what it is now? Okay, let's talk about it. Personal growth is a non-linear process. Wouldn't it be great if all of us could just hop on the personal growth train and it just goes gradually up and up and up without any stalling, without any going backwards? And the truth is that's just never going to happen. Your personal growth is kind of like that line on the stock market that you see. There's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys. But the good news is that a valley that's happening now is probably at the same level as a peak that was happening 5 years ago. So what that means is that yes, you are gradually ascending if you stay in alignment with your personal growth, which we can talk a lot about in future podcasts about how exactly you're going to do that, because there is a very clear way to do that, which is your values. So you can keep ascending, you will keep ascending. Just know that there will be times where it will feel like you're not, and it will feel like you're not making any progress whatsoever, and there will be times where it actually feels like you're going backwards. And if you've ever attempted anything that was really challenging and long term especially, you know that you experience this. The problem with so many people, for so many people, is thinking that this means that they're not good enough to keep going, or that this means that they should quit. Now, there are times to quit things. Like I mentioned before, you feel free to quit on goals if they're not aligning with your values, not aligning with the direction you want to go in. Never, ever, ever quit on your values. Never, ever quit on the direction that you want to go in your life. And so when we hit those times where we're stalling, where it's not just a straight up linear process straight into the sunset, we need to remember that. We need to remember that, yes, personal growth, the journey of personal growth, the lifelong journey of personal growth will have valleys. There will be times where you stall. There will be times where it will feel like you're going backwards. And it's so demoralizing. It's so discouraging. But if you have that greater context, that greater understanding that this is not a linear process, that sometimes is all you need to know to keep going.
Just to focus in on a second about, because you mentioned this, I think 2 or 3 times today about being willing to give up on a goal or quit a goal. You're not suggesting, right, when things get hard, give up. You're suggesting something different, right? Just to be clear.
Absolutely. Not when things get tough or hard does that mean that you should quit a goal. When you become aware that the goal is not moving you in the direction that you want to go, that's when it's time to quit. Now, this is a tricky part. You're raising a good question because it's a really tricky thing. One way you're going to know that it's not moving you in the right direction is because something feels very unfulfilling. Okay. Now that could mean that, oh, it's hard. And I go, well, that's that unfulfilling thing that Damon was talking about on this podcast. Therefore, it's time to quit. What you need to go back to, and this is I talk about this so much in my videos, clarity about your values.
Mhm.
So if you're clear about your values and the goal, even though it's feeling crappy, you're trying to move toward it, it doesn't feel good. If you go back to your goals, to your values, and you're very clear about your values, then you can ask yourself, okay, is this still really lining up with my values? It's just that I'm having a tough time. And if the answer is yes, then you want to stick with it. If the answer is no, the reason why this feels bad is it actually feels like I'm going against my values. Now you know you need to switch your goal. A good example of that for me was my insurance business. I
Mhm.
just thought, oh, I'm the problem. I need to fix me. And when I fix me, then I'll be a huge success in my insurance business. And eventually I had to come to terms with the fact that no, insurance was just not for me. There was no way that I was going to conform myself into finding selling insurance and servicing insurance products was going to be fulfilling for me. There was just no way to make that happen. And if there was, it was just going to be so difficult and so time consuming. I could take that same time and that same effort and turn it into something that I really did enjoy. And that was much more
Mhm.
motivating. So
Right.
it's also sometimes a matter of efficiency. What will help you feel fulfilled and motivated to do every single day because you enjoy it so much? Turn that into a business and you'll be much more successful than trying to conform to something that's not really suited for you.
Sure. Makes sense.
You
Yeah,
got
I
something?
think,
Okay. You
yeah,
had that look on your face.
when you mentioned about being nonlinear and having valleys, the truth is that oftentimes we learn so much more from the valleys than when we succeed. We hear oftentimes that a failure is a lesson. You learn much more when you fail rather than when you succeed. So I think having a nonlinear process is actually a very good aspect of personal growth. It would probably be a very boring life to just go on a straight line.
That's what I have said in the past about, like, if you knew for certain that you would succeed at everything that you were going to try, because that's what a lot of people are wanting before they even step out and try anything, how boring would that
Yeah.
be? So yeah, I completely agree with you. The if the adventure is the fact that there's uncertainty in it, and yeah, it does not feel good when you hit a valley, but that's part of the uncertainty. And what you can also know is that as long as you keep moving, eventually you start ascending out of the valley and you start going up another peak. So, it's all about context, I think, in that regard.
Sure. For me, when I think back of some of the more challenging moments, in retrospect, it was probably when some of the areas where I grew the most. It was just like a bit of a steeper climb during that moment. It might have felt like I was sliding backwards, but really it's just a bit of a steeper climb for that context or area of my life at that time.
Yeah, and when I think about my insurance business, I don't look back on that as like this terrible mistake that I made for 11 years. I look back on it as like, wow, how much did I learn from that? It was definitely a valley, and it wasn't a valley for 11 years. It was more like for 5 years. Once I realized what
Hmm.
was happening, then I started going up the peak for the
Hmm.
next 6 years until I was able to walk away from it. And people thought I was crazy for walking away from it. Like, you're walking away from passive income. Why would you do that? It's like, it's getting in the way of my fulfillment, and it's getting in the way of all the other things that I could be investing my time and energy in. So yeah, but I learned so much from that whole process. So yeah, you completely concur with the valley being a learning.
Yeah.
All right, number two, what personal growth is. Personal growth is increasing awareness of who you are. When you when you feel like you're knowing yourself more, you're knowing yourself to a greater extent, you're growing. Like, that's one of the wonderful things about growing. And it's not, I think a lot of people try to kind of skip past the growth part, and they just want to go to the knowing part. And it's like, well, no, you need to grow in order to know. Wow, I did not plan that. So that increasing knowing of who you are, which then opens up more possibilities of who you can become. To me, that is such a sure sign that you are growing on a very deep and personal level. No comments on that one.
It makes total sense. And yeah, I was just thinking back on the first time I was so conscious of how much I grew was when I was 17. And it was such a pleasant feeling. And now mentioning it, I'm realizing it was basically awareness of who I am and what I'm capable of. I was putting together pieces of people giving me compliments on certain qualities I didn't think I had. And I was like, oh yeah, I think I am that quality. And it was the year when I felt I grew the most. And definitely awareness of who I was a main part of it.
And with that, you start to, it's like the more you know, the more you know you don't know. And that becomes exciting, because the more you know yourself, the more you're going to know that there's so much more about you that you don't know. And that just opens up so many more possibilities. It's that mindset alone that just opens up a lot of possibilities of who you can become.
When you say awareness of yourself, are you referencing like using certain types of tools and methodologies or techniques to explore how you're organizing yourself unconsciously? Are you talking about journaling? What do you mean? What do you mean exactly?
Really, all of the all of the above. I mean, if you're doing a lot of deep work, you might start becoming more aware of, say, what you're not good at, what your weaknesses are. And that's great to know those things. A lot of people want to move away from those things. It's like, no, it's good to know that, so that
Mhm.
you can then make it at least a choice. Do I want to work on this and strengthen it, or is it not a weakness that is worth working on? Because sometimes you might realize that, you go, you know what, I'm never going to be good at this. I might as well hire somebody else to do it for me. But if you're not aware of it, you can't make that choice, right? You can't make choices about things that you're not aware of. So just by questioning, journaling, using NLP processes and techniques, you
Mhm.
can go deeper and find what those weaknesses are, and you're also going to find what are those strengths. And by having more awareness about what your strengths are, the more likely you can. Well, at the very base level, you get to make a choice. Do I want to continue strengthening this? Or because I am already strong in this area, do I want to go invest my time somewhere else? So it's really about that choice. You can't have that choice if you're not aware of it. Now, you can take it into like more like everyday life things.
Mhm.
That's why I love to travel. And you're traveling, and in some ways, you're enduring challenges while you're traveling, because you're outside of your routine. And when
Mhm.
you're outside of your routine, you kind of become blind to who you are if you're just stuck in routine. It's kind of like a fish in water doesn't know any different than water. It doesn't know what water is. It's just
Mhm.
water all the time. So it has nothing to compare it to. And that's what happens with our routines. If we're too caught in our routines every single day, we don't really see ourselves reflected in them. We just see this constant, whatever, this constant activity that's really habitual. You step outside of that, and then now you're looking into a mirror and you go, okay, how do I respond in these new situations? And there will be those times where you go, oh, I didn't know I had that in me. And then other
Mhm.
times you go, oh, that was a little ugly, I want to change that about me. And so that's why, on a outside of the sort of personal development work that I do on myself, like journaling, like applying NLP processes, for me, traveling is that other piece, and it's a lot more fun as well. But you get confronted by yourself while you're traveling.
So that is exactly why I like to set aspirational goals. That what you just described is exactly why I like to set like these things that there's no way to even commit to them without knowing that I'm going to have to face aspects of myself that I would not unless I just really went on that. It's a very similar journey to me. Um, uh, uh, Yulia, you mentioned a few minutes ago about someone referencing something. When do you remember when that was, or how you became aware of those aspects of yourself? It sounded like you became aware of some qualities. Um, can you share a little bit about what that moment, that time when you became aware of yourself that way?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was 17. I was just getting started with personal growth. Now I was looking for books on this topic, and it was interesting. And I remember I was starting to volunteer in multiple projects, and I would hear people leading those projects giving me compliments on the qualities I have, maybe
Mhm.
saying, ah, she's very adaptable. And they would reference seeing me in a particular environment where I was very adaptable to the new changes.
Mhm.
And then I was also receiving people saying that I'm like a sponge. And that comparison, when I heard it the first time, I was like, oh, whatever. But then the second time, the third time, I put the pieces together, and I was thinking, yeah, actually, I do like to collect as much information as I can whenever I'm in a situation that provides me that.
Mhm.
And it was so interesting because most probably those things were happening before as well. The
Mhm.
only problem is that I was not aware of it.
Mhm.
It was unconscious. And at this particular time, I was, wow. And, it felt like by being so conscious of those things, I had such a much more clarity of who I am
Mhm.
and of what I can do. I think it also gave me more motivation.
Mhm.
And yeah, I believe that clarity of your qualities, it's so, so important.
Mhm. Mhm. Definitely. So when do either one of you have some actionables around bringing that awareness to who you are? Damien, you referenced like you have a great ritual around travel and how that kind of wakes up your senses to to a lot of aspects of yourself. Do you have any suggestions for people to find that kind of that mechanism that works for them?
Well, there's always NLP and NLP processes and techniques. So, I'm a committed practitioner, and I have been for over 10 years.
Sure.
Uh, if it's, if that's not your interest, then before I was injured, and I'm waiting and a little impatient about getting back to it, but Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for me does that a lot. There's quite a bit of purity in when you're sparring with someone, and it's definitive. They either choke you out, armbar you, or you choke them out or armbar them. It's very confrontational in that sense, and you're being tested, and it's much more of a mental test than it is a physical test. And right away, there's no argument about it. It's happening one way or the other. There's such a sort of definitive reality to that. Whereas a lot of times, a lot of people, and again, I'm guilty of this too, just kind of living the movie in my head of whatever I'm thinking about, and that you're not really dealing with actual reality and the feedback of actual reality. So when you're traveling, that's one of them. You have to sort of figure out, especially if you're going to a different country where you don't speak the language, you're not familiar with the culture or
Yeah.
anything like
Yeah.
that. It's very confrontational, and it's why a lot of people don't travel. A lot of people say, "Oh, I wish I had the money to travel." I was like, you don't need a lot of money to travel. It really does not take that much money. So I think that's just an excuse people use. And then in jujitsu, it's very physically demanding. It doesn't feel good to lose, but that's part of what you learn how to do. You learn how to lose. You learn how to accept defeat. You learn one of the greatest things you can ever do to learn how to succeed is to learn how to fail. And so, but you have to get that experience. You have to put yourself in those challenging situations to do that.
So um, for those that are listening to this, I would encourage you to either it could be in the comments, it could be on a journal, but check in with the last time that you were tested, and what positive insights you can you find from that. Um,
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in the last one too, because
oh yeah.
you're jumping ahead, Nate. Come on, man. You know the All right. The third one is increasing awareness of what you can do and who you can become. And I think we kind of covered this as you guys
Mhm.
were, adding your parts to it and also asking me questions about it. I think we kind of covered that. That's the increasing awareness of who you are is also hand in hand with an increasing awareness of what you can do and who you can become. And I think that who you can become is oftentimes a missing piece. We don't think about the future as much. We're kind of focused in right now. What am I doing? What am I good at now? What am I not so good at? But always think in terms of, well, okay, well, how does this play out in the future? How is this going to
Mhm.
go, and if as things move forward in your life? And I
Mhm.
think a great way to make good decisions in life is to think, okay, if I'm doing this now, and everything's a decision, right? Even if you say, well, I'm not going to make a decision about this now, you're
That's
making a
a
decision.
decision. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're allowing circumstances to make your decision for you.
Mhm.
So when you ask yourself, okay, if I keep doing things the way that I'm doing now, what does this look like in 5 years? And that will scare the hell out of a lot of people, depending on what it is you're doing. And that's a great thing because then you go, oh, okay, stopping right now. I'm drinking every day. Okay, what does drinking every day look like 5 years from now?
Mm.
you might quit drinking, or you might pull back quite a bit, if you think about it that way. And then you can do it the opposite way too. Well, what if I spend every morning handwriting 3 pages about my thoughts and where I want to go in life and what do I want to do? What does that look like in 5 years? That's very motivating. So thinking about who you can become based on what it is you're doing now or not doing now can help you come up with a lot of great practices and habits that are just even one-time decisions that you might make. You make that one decision and it changes everything. We went to see Henry Rollins in Lexington, Kentucky, and it's not because Henry Rollins only visits Kentucky, but he does spoken word shows all over the country. He was sold out here in Santa Cruz, so we jumped over to Lexington and went to see him. He's 61 years old now. He was one of the lead singers for Black Flag, and he wrote a book called Get in the Van, and that says it all, because that's basically what it was. The Black Flag had a show, and they invited him up to sing because he followed the band a lot, and he was a real fan of the band. And so he gets up and sings, and he's so impassioned that they call him up the next day and they say, "Do you want to audition for the band?" And he goes and auditions, and they say, well, "We'd like to have you. Do you want to do it?" And he thought, okay, well, I have a job. He was working at Haagen-Dazs, and he was a manager. And he was like, okay, I can go that route, or I can take my chance with a punk band that is not famous, only among punksters or punks, and really take my chances here. And he took the chance. He got in the van and he took off with them, and it changed everything. So when you think about those decisions that you're making right now or not making right now, and allowing circumstance to make those decisions, think about what's that going to be like 5, 10, 20 years down the line. That will change your perspective, and it will certainly move you toward greater personal growth. All right, number 4, increasing connection with people and the world around you. I think this one is so overlooked and so important, because when we're on the path to personal growth, a lot of times we tend to focus only on ourselves. And this also fits with the other one that I said, what personal growth is not. The whole status thing, impressing people, that tends to disconnect you from other people, and that's not serving you. There's that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And this is an example of what I'm talking about here. If you feel superior to other people, that's not helping you. If you feel inferior to other people, that's not helping you. If you feel like you're connecting with people, trust me, that will take you far further than you could ever imagine. And a lot of times it's not so immediate. And I think that's why people overlook this one. This could take years, but no one succeeds in a vacuum. No one builds an empire in a vacuum. You need other people, and not just other people. It's about connecting with the world around you. What is going on around you? Are you even aware of what's going on around you?
Right.
That's super important too, because there's opportunities going on around you all the time. I remember going through my NLP master practitioner training that I was attending, and we did some belief processes. And I just remember, like, the world just didn't look the same again after that point. What I realized was that there was opportunities right under my nose that I was missing. And because I couldn't see them, I was in a lot of pain. I was suffering quite a bit. And then suddenly they were revealed to me, and I was just like, I can't believe it's that simple. It's right here in front of me. And I made massive decisions right then and there that completely changed, especially my money situation. I was broke for the longest time, and it was so obvious to me suddenly why. And I could make a decision in like a matter of seconds and change that. It was unbelievable. So it's about connecting with the opportunities around you as well. So connecting with people, connecting with the opportunities around you, that is personal growth. When you feel that connection, know that you're growing. And we grow with other people. That is how we find our humanity, by really connecting deeply with other people. And that should be a challenge, something that I would learn to challenge myself with, especially with people that I disagree with, or I can't understand how they can think the way that they think. And I started challenging myself to sort of connect with them on some level. And that's not an easy thing to do. And it's very uncomfortable. And in the world of social media, we're always looking for things that confirm our biases rather than challenge them. And so one way that you can really grow is to challenge your biases by trying to understand where that person's coming from. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean that you're going to try to change your mind about something you feel very strongly about. That's not it. What you want to do is ask yourself, how did that person come to that thinking? How can I connect with them on a very human level to understand why they have the perspective that they do? you will grow as a person for sure when you do that.
You mentioned the opportunities, and what I've noticed, because you actually pointed it out to me, because I did take a lot of opportunities that came in my way. The thing is, when you focus on opportunities, you will start seeing them around you. But when you don't, you just overlook them, and you may look back on it. And once you have this understanding, you realize, actually, I did have opportunities along the way. So it's very important to just be open to it, and the opportunities will be around you.
Yeah, if you're complaining about other people having opportunities that you don't, that's just blinding you from the opportunities that are right in front of you. And that's a great way to blind yourself from it. And I think on some level we do that. And again, I'm guilty of it too. I think on some level we do that to sort of let ourselves off the hook so that we don't have to go and try and do those things. We say like, oh yeah, that person only got that because their mom and dad are wealthy, or they had this whatever opportunity. And so that sort of lets me off the hook from actually getting out there and trying it and doing it. And, a lot of times that's what we're trying to do, is just let ourselves off the hook. Because if we just say, no, sure, that person might have gotten a break or an opportunity, but the truth is that you, in most cases, you make your opportunities. The more you put yourself out there, the more you connect with others, the more you connect with the world around you. Not only do you see opportunities, you also get offered more opportunities. So it takes an active engagement in it. People don't just sit around doing nothing, and then life just throws all these opportunities at them, and then that's why they're successful or happy or any of those things. Sure, some people have more opportunities right from the start than other people do, but that doesn't mean you can't create your own opportunities and find opportunities that are around you.
If somebody is good, has a some kind of growth practice that doesn't include others, like you're referencing, as far as connection and community, do you have what would you recommend for that person?
We all like having friends, and so many studies have shown how people who are socially engaged, even introverts, live longer and live happier, more fulfilling lives.
Sure.
And you can go out there and meet people, and it might sound like, wow, that's so strange and awkward just to think of going out there and just meeting people, but you can do it that way. And yes, it will be strange and awkward at first. And it doesn't have to be that way. You have some interest, and for sure that if you have an interest, somebody else has that same interest as well. So you can start off with shared interests. My son just started a kaiju group at his school. If you don't know what a kaiju is, it's a mythical large creature like Godzilla. Godzilla is a kaiju, and you have all of these, Japanese movies with kaijus in them. He started a kaiju club, and I was like, oh man, I don't want him to be disappointed whenever nobody joins the club, because nobody knows what a kaiju is. 6 people joined his club. 6 people know what a kaiju is.
For one, he did tell us one didn't know, but he had interest enough.
Yeah, one person who signed up didn't even know what a kaiju was. It sounded interesting to him though, and he signed up. So I mean, that's such an easy thing to do. That you can't tell me you're not interested in something. You're interested in something, and there are other people who are interested in that thing as well. And so you can always come together under a common interest. But I have done the thing where I was like, okay, I just want to challenge myself to go out there and meet strangers, and I did it. And I'm very uncomfortable at first, but very rewarding afterward. So you can do it, and that's really a good way to lead up to the fifth and final thing that personal growth is, and that is it's challenge. You cannot grow in comfort. It just doesn't work that way. I like to use analogies about exercise or like lifting weights. If you just lifted the same weight all the time because it's easy and comfortable because you can do it, you're never going to grow. Your muscles are never going to grow. Your strength is never going to grow. Growth is challenge, and challenge is often uncomfortable. We all need a certain amount of comfort in life. You can't be completely uncomfortable. You won't be able to function well. But seeking more and more comfort is never going to, endeavors that are based on comfort are never going to help you grow. So you got to be willing to challenge yourself. And the truth is that we really do enjoy challenges. We convince ourselves that we don't because we focus on the discomfort part of it. But if we look past it, and we think about what is the challenge going to bring for us, what kind of personal growth that's going to bring, especially the more it aligns with your values. I see someone put a comment here about enjoying the process. Enjoying the process just means aligning with your values, choosing pursuits that align with your values, and that will always be enjoyable. That you will feel it as you're doing it. It's its own natural motivation, and then personal growth becomes its own reward. It's not about that. That's why I don't like it to be about a goal. The growth itself, allow that to be its own reward, and the way you're going to do that is by challenging yourself. That personal growth and challenge are almost synonymous. They're just two parts of a bigger whole.
What do you mean?
You can't have one without the other.
I see. Yeah.
All right. Anybody, any last words before we wrap this up?
I think we covered it very well.
All right. Well, we went over what personal growth is not and what it is. And if you take the time to think these things through, think through the things that we talked about here, it will definitely change the way you approach personal growth, without a doubt. I don't hear anybody else really talking about these things as it relates to personal growth, but it's worth examining what personal growth is to you, what it means to you, what do you want out of it. I just hear so many people throwing that term around. It sounds good, but they don't really know what it means. And so if you just take the time to examine some of these terms and really look into it and understand it, you'll have a new perspective about it, and you'll have much more clarity about it. And clarity is half the battle. When you're clear about what you want, when you're clear about who you want to become, when you're clear about how you want to grow, it just makes it so much easier. Now you have something to focus on. And when you have that thing out there to focus on, that vision, it makes the discomfort, it makes the valleys a lot easier to handle. You have that perspective, okay, I'm just in a valley, I'm just in a setback. That's okay. I'm not giving up here. I'm going to acknowledge where I'm at, and that's going to enable me to keep going.
Well, it was nice to hang out, guys. It's good to see
Yeah.
you.
I hope everyone enjoyed it. Feel free to ask questions. I will respond to you in the comments below. And we plan to do this twice a month. We're getting our schedule sorted out, and so we'll be doing this about twice a month. And we'll be uploading also regular videos as well as shorts. So look out for all of those.
Bye.
Take care.